Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I nearly said good morning, but it is afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dara Reynolds. I'm the marketing manager here at CommSec, and joining me today is Matt O'Callaghan from Corrata. Today's session, Securing the Unseen, BYOD, Mobile Threats and the Visibility Gap. And it's safe to say that it's not just BYOD, it's mobile threats in general, but the angle that we took today's webinar was on the BYOD because it seems to be a bigger issue, but most of those problems can extend across to general mobile as well. So before we kick off, I just wanted to frame today's webinar, and something that caught my eye in the last couple of days. It was actually on Sunday, this piece in the Irish Times asking whether the smartphone in your employee's pocket is the weakest link in your security stack. So as you can see, the headline was blunt. Phones could be the chink in a company's armor. So yeah, interesting article, and the numbers behind it were hard to ignore. There was a recent survey had found that 70% of Irish SMEs are more worried about attacks on mobile devices than they were this time last year. So that awareness is welcome. But there's also a problem. More than 40% of those same businesses still give full unrestricted access to resources on personal devices, everything from emails to apps to customer documents. So add to that as well that there's 1 in 5 businesses don't monitor for mobile security threats at all. So it's not really a gap, it's really leaving the door ajar. So that's why we're on this webinar today, to look at this problem. And adding to that as well, there's almost 1 million Irish people that are working in some form of hybrid or remote role as well. So there's an added extra problem there. So BYOD has become standard practice, and that's not going to change, but it has introduced a new category of risk that many organizations have quietly deprioritized, and often in the name of productivity or convenience. So today's question is not whether mobile is a risk, it's about getting a very clear picture on what the risks look like, where the real exposures live, and what practical response looks like for most organizations. So today's webinar we put together in partnership with Corrata, a Dublin-based mobile threat defense company, and one of the most well-respected in their space. But first, for those of you who don't know, let me tell you a little bit about CommSec and what we do. So as we can see here, the agenda on the page, we'll do a quick introduction of CommSec. We'll pass on to Matt. He's going to be doing the Securing the Unseen, the main portion of the webinar. We'll have a short demo of the Corrata platform. We'll have some Q&As. So I'll open up the Q&A box shortly, where you can drop in your questions in text format. And we will be looking at those towards the end, and then closing, and then Matt will speak to us about the next steps if people are interested in finding out more about what Corrata have to offer. So who are we? So CommSec are a specialist ITC security partner. We're 100% cybersecurity, and we run a 24/7 managed SOC operation. We're Irish based, and we're supported by our team here in Ireland from our offices in Blanchetown. Our standards include ISO 27001, and we align our clients to various international cybersecurity legislation and frameworks such as NIS2, DORA, ISO 27001 as well, CIS controls as well. So we've got clients in Ireland, UK, EU, Asia and North America. And the industries that we support include software, financial services, logistics, fintech, public bodies, among others. And we offer end-to-end cybersecurity services through 4 pillars. And as you can see, SOC 24/7 is our first pillar. Then our security testing, which is pen testing and vulnerability management. And then professional services. So we offer CISO as a service, DPO as a service, and we do cyber assessments, as I said, to some of those international cybersecurity frameworks. And we also do third-party solutions. So we work with the leading edge vendors such as Corrata in each of our those spaces within our security solutions that support our customers. And just to mention some of our value clients, some of these are household names. You'd recognize them, so I won't spend too long on that. And then we actually have a poll to run as well, so I'll just get that poll ready before I hand over to Matt. So just share this poll. It'll come up on screen shortly for everybody. So appreciate if everyone would get involved. How would you describe your organization's current approach to mobile security? And you've got 4 options there. So that's just launching on your screens now. And that's live. So we let that run for a minute or two and we can come back to that. For now, I will pass you over to Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Dara. Thanks so much for that. Let me just share my screen. So it's great to be here today, everybody, to talk you through today's webinar topic of securing the unseen. Really, really important topic to be discussing. And yeah, I'm delighted to be here today to bring you through the content that we've put together. I think it's important to emphasize the importance of looking at the mobile device as a really vital endpoint to secure. Organizations traditionally spend a huge amount of time and resources locking down laptops, networks, clouds, but that device that's in everybody's pocket remains largely invisible in most cases to security teams. So the gap that's there through solution or vision, visibility even, the risk it creates, and then the steps that we can take to better secure the, I suppose, riskiest device within our business is what today's session is all about. So, so yeah, let's get into it. So to start, just to introduce you all to Corrata for those that aren't familiar with us and what we do. So we are a mobile EDR solution with network layer DLP products as well. So we protect both iOS and Android devices, meaning mobiles and tablets. We are Dublin based. We're Dublin headquartered on the market since 2016. ISO 27001 certified, EU data residency, which is really important for a lot of industries these days. And we're a Microsoft Lisa member. Due to our open API, we have integrations with many leading MDM and SIM solutions, meaning we can fit natively directly into your security stack. And we typically find ourselves active in those highly regulated sectors through healthcare, government, financial services. But in saying that, we do have a network of customers in almost every industry due to our vast network of partners globally, like CommSec, who do such a good job in positioning Corrata and the value to customers, mainly kind of Northern Europe, UKI, and North America. Looking at the product and the solution that we provide, so our product is active in both the corporate and personal device instances. As I mentioned, iOS and Android devices, and when integrated with MDM, we can be across up to 10,000 devices and more in kind of 24 hours. When we talk about Corrata and the value that we provide as a product to our customers, we're looking at 100% visibility into the, I suppose, health and threats across all of their devices. Implementing zero trust policies on both sides, the personal and corporate side, and then being a privacy conscious business and really offering compliance by design rather than by choice. And that's really how our solution has been built, with that end user's privacy concerns in mind, but also helping that business stay compliant with regulations like GDPR and NIS2 and the likes globally. Our solution fits into 3 core buckets. Zero Trust is all about our device scanning abilities, where we assess 3 core fundamentals, be it the operating system, device configuration settings, and if there's any malware or dangerous apps potentially on the device. We look at the EDR bucket, which is kind of the meat and bones of our solution, which is going to be wrapped throughout today's presentation. And that's all about how we can actively help businesses protect against phishing, all types of phishing, really, SMS, QR codes, socials, advanced spyware detection mitigation, insecure communications, and then moving into DLP. So being able to give businesses power in having visibility in terms of what AI usage is going on the network side, what webmail is being used, what file sharing products are being used, and then being able to implement policies around how their employees are interacting with these systems online. So moving on from the product, it's important today to, obviously, as Dara has kind of already highlighted these points, to really emphasize the threat as it is within our industry, within our territory. And it is important to emphasize that these figures are Irish and European numbers. You know, I want to make that point because I feel that US stats are sometimes easy to discount. But you know, the recent release of these stats it's really stark in kind of positioning that gap and that risk profile around personal and corporate devices. As Dara emphasised, 70% of organisations are concerned about mobile attacks, yet 40% still, you know, allow personal phones unrestricted access to company resources. 1 in 4, as we can see there, Irish companies had suffered a breach last year, yet 20% don't proactively monitor threats at all. You know, I think about what that combination means when something does go wrong for these businesses. And then more globally, we look at 42% of all EU cyber incidents being mobile based, with 85% of mobile phishing happening outside of emails. It really emphasizes the need to take your mobile security posture a step forward, to be able to incorporate those mobile devices to identify the threat vectors that are now actively looking to target mobile phones or tablets, because bad actors, they know that these endpoints are typically unprotected and visible and are essentially their easiest way into a corporate resource. So looking at that convenience and risk piece, convenience is always a word that comes into the conversation when we look at BYOD. We have global workforces, work from home policies now, and it's easy for smaller SMB businesses and scale ups and mid-market companies to allow access to these corporate systems on the personal phone because, as I said, it's convenient. Convenience carries a lot of risk. You know, employees are expecting flexibility, which is reasonable. The problem isn't so much the policy that's being implemented, it's that most organizations have no visibility into what's actually happening when those personal devices touch company data. There are kind of 4 key vectors that we consistently talk about to our customers that most organizations have zero protection against because of those BYOD policies and lack of insights. And they circle around personal cloud. You know, someone emails a file to their personal Gmail to finish at home, data's gone. The ongoing usage of shadow AI across businesses, with 70% of staff openly admit to pasting sensitive data into the likes of ChatGPT and Gemini on their phone, gone. You know, the Wi-Fi attacks, so our traveling workforce accessing poorly encrypted Wi-Fi networks in hotels, airports, coffee shops, and having no visibility into the decryption standards within those connections. The possible attack vectors opening up there. And then the use of shadow SaaS, so applications being installed on these devices with no knowledge, creating additional data flows within the businesses that are completely invisible to organizations. These are all real risks that companies are facing due to that, you know, convenience element to BYOD. And these are how we're really framing the value of taking a step forward and looking at these devices and the importance of understanding how they're being used and what they're accessing, and the security of these devices, essentially. I suppose to underpin this risk as well at scale, phishing alone has risen over 4,000% since the introduction of ChatGPT, which really shows the increased level of threat. And, you know, the increased level of protection really isn't following pace. So this is the importance of being able to, you know, map those risks against the convenience of allowing employees to access these corporate environments on their personal devices. With that risk and with that convenience comes a gap. So you're looking at that mobile visibility gap. So many, this I suppose is the most important slide. And really want you all to kind of look at this and take it in, because it separates the powers of an MDM and the powers of an MTD product really well. You know, your MDM dashboard right now, it's very capable. It's, you know, it's fit for purpose, and it's very capable of, you know, device enrollment, making sure operating systems are updated, passcodes are enforced, managing app deployment and access within those applications. You know, these are all green ticks. This is all devices secure from an MDM standpoint. But what it actually misses is quite a lot. It misses all types of phishing and, you know, mobile phishing attempts, data leakage possibilities on the network side via AI usage, file sharing products, webmail, and along with all of the types of threat vectors like possible spyware, malware, and those insecure communication threats that I spoke about a moment ago. When this breach happens via mobile, and we know that 1 in 4 firms had one last year. There's nothing to investigate on the back end. There's no traffic logs. There's no connection history. There's no attack timeline. And the security team is working backwards from a breach they can't reconstruct, and have no way to work through what happened, how it happened, and how do we remediate these issues going forward. 20% of firms, they don't monitor proactively at all. NIS2, GDPR, even central bank rules all require you to demonstrate control over your data flows. And the fundamental fact is, without mobile visibility on both sides, corporate and personal, this can't be done completely when those devices are authenticating through to your corporate applications. So the core differences for a business, when you look at the MDM and MTD products, I wanted to frame this because it really is the question that we get more than any other. We already have Intune. Why do we need a specific MTD product? Why do we need this? And it really is the right question. And the answer is basically that they're solving fundamentally different problems. If you think of it this way, in terms of MDM, it kind of locks the door. It manages what devices are allowed to do, enroll them, push apps, enforce passcodes, wipe them remotely, all really important stuff. And it does it really, really well. But locks and systems like this can't really tell you when someone's trying to pick them and someone's trying to, hack. So Corrata is very much viewed as the alarm system within the building. And it's the layer that detects what threats are actively trying to do on channels and through vector like MDM, on channels and through vectors like MDM was never really designed to watch. Intune can't, or other MDMs for that matter, can't inspect network traffic. It has no phishing detection on WhatsApp. It can't detect, spyware. It has no DLP on the network side. So it really is doing one job very well, but there is a massive gap there when we look at the security stance of an MTD specific solution. So if you frame it as MDM manages what devices can do, Corrata defends against what threats are trying to do. So there's a world in which both need to exist to offer that full rounded protection. So I wanted to spend a minute on where this is going, because I suppose the threat in 2026 is categorically different from 2 years ago, and it really is accelerating at such a high pace. AI generated spear phishing, 82% of phishing sites now specifically target mobile devices. Attackers aren't blasting out generic emails anymore. They're generating perfectly personalized messages through the use of AI. Phishing as a service, 95% of these attacks defeat MFA. This is, I suppose, the one that people are often most surprised by when we talk through the use cases, because the thing that essentially they rolled out to protect your users is being systematically rerouted and routed around even. AI enhanced spyware, so the likes of your Pegasus, Predator, Dark Sword in recent times. We know mobile malware, it's up 48% year on year. These don't show up in file hashes in terms of their existence. We work to detect and protect against them via very odd or anomalous network behaviors, because the only thing that spyware has to do really is to send data somewhere. So that's where we look to intercept and we look to detect if there is an issue. And then shadow AI, we know the usage of AI is skyrocketing year over year. 70% of people actively admit to pasting sensitive data into consumer LLMs on their phones, not because they're careless or malicious, just because they're trying to do their work quicker, smarter, faster. Unfortunately, that means that all that data is leaving the visibility of security teams, and then there's no way of knowing where it's going and what it's being used for in I suppose after that. A big part of our discussions with all of our customers and prospects on the back of framing that convenience against the risk and in the differences in MDM and MTD and why there's such an importance to look at a mobile specific protection layer is building that practical security strategy and how they can look to gain visibility around those devices and implement policy at scale, especially in the personal device world where adoption is low and people don't want these agents on their phones. And it's how we're working with them to achieve that. And this is very much a discussion that we have framed from our standing. So it's 5 steps. None of them ever require ripping out what they've done. As I say, we integrate with other solutions. So we look to work with what they have and build on top of it. And then we very much start with understanding what their mobile estate is doing, how it's being used. Most organizations we speak to generally don't know how many personal devices are accessing their systems right now. That number is always higher than expected, always. We then look to deploy our NTD alongside MDM for the reasons I mentioned before. We look at the enforcement of the BYOD devices, policies and trust through, our Identity Gate product, which allows only devices that Corrata is active on and is verified the security of those devices authenticate into their corporate resources, which helps protect for those unknown devices coming through. We then allow them to define their DLP policies through visibility and understanding what's being used. We then monitor, detect, and remediate ongoing. So it's fleet-wide threat dashboards, automatic quarantine abilities, employee self-remediation guides. So we empower the end user to remediate any issues to keep the IT support load low. And all these are active steps that we kind of handhold with our clients to work through to lead them to a more protected, more secure future. And confidence in knowing that when personal devices are authenticating through, it's okay. And this all ties into our zero trust and 100% visibility value props. So as the outcome here is, full visibility, BYOD secure, without enrollment, AI governance, deployed under 24 hours, and zero added IT overhead is our goal when deploying. So it's all good having these conversations and talking through the stats and the solution and the risk, but I think it's always important to look at what this means to us specifically. And I typically break it down in terms of business impact within the mobile risk, visibility risk into 3 sections even. We first look at the financial impact. The average breach in Europe now sits at 3.9 million. We then look at the reputational damage. GDPR giving you 72 hours to notify regulators of a breach. We can't manage the message. We can't control the narrative. It hurts that reputation. It then means stocks might potentially drop, customers churn, media scrutiny, and everything that comes with it. And then there's the trust element, which might be the most damaging of all. Trust, as we know, is easy to break and hard to rebuild. So will customers stay after there's an incident? Will partners want to work with us? How does this affect the investor relationships or potential company valuations? These really aren't hypothetical questions that I'm just, speaking through. These are the discussions that we're actively having with boards, and they're actively asking these questions of us right now. So with that, I would like to jump into a quick demonstration of Corrata. You can all bear with me 1 second. Now, so having framed that, I'm not going to bring you through the entire demo, but I wanted to show 3, I suppose, key areas in how we look to deliver the visibility trust to our customers. And firstly, as referenced in the deck, it's that just giving 100% visibility. It's a complete go-to security center for all information regarding the device fleet across the globe, policies for BYOD and corporate. And what it's going to give you, it's going to give you an idea in terms of how many devices are enrolled and pending. It's going to give you a really good insight into the device's security score, sitting in good, fair, and bad, things that might reduce it down, or outdated operating systems, no passcodes, iPhones being jailbroken, or something into bad category will be malwares being detected, or a combination of the other kind of poor security configuration settings. It's based on this graph when we choose to quarantine and unquarantine devices based on how secure they are to enter into your environments. We then look at a live feed and all the network traffic. This is all completely anonymous, so we don't have any user detail here. There's nothing saved or stored, but we use this to enforce acceptable use policies. So you being able to determine what your employees can and can't access on the devices. We have a collection of the latest network threats, the category, the action taken, and then the count of threats that have been detected. We've a collection of the device issues, so understanding how many devices are out of date OSs, how many are quarantined, how many have malware and the likes, and then this is all clickable, so we can go through and we can get a really clear, concise insight into those vulnerable devices throughout our network, and then message them directly from this instance to get them to update, uninstall, unquarantine, whatever it might be. We'll then look at our DLP. So this is pulling information on the policy I've configured. So this is going to list all of the different services that are being accessed across your fleet and the action taken. Typically, our customers would set this to allow and report. So all traffic will be allowed, but this report will be built to show them over a month or a quarter what's being accessed. And they then choose to block individual service categories or individual products based on how they want to enforce those policies. We look at the vulnerable network traffic. We've any integrations that are live throughout the system. We've our threat history graph there, so a collection of all the threats detected over a predefined period of time and the actions taken against them. We then have a collection of our vulnerable devices, ranked most vulnerable top to least vulnerable on the bottom. We've detections by protocol. So we have our DNS here. So Corrata is, due to our architecture, we sit on the device and we scan all of our network traffic on the device to a DPI. So we can actually assess the traffic at a much greater level than many of our competitors. A lot of our competitors would focus on kind of DNS in terms of assessing the security of those connections. We can go a little bit deeper than that. We can look at TLS, we can look at QUIC, we can look at TCP, and it kind of calculates into around 23 to 25% on average more detections because of how we sit and where we scan the traffic on the device. We can then monitor the use of high port numbers, which is critical to identifying the likes of spyware. You can set this to allow a report for, typically the likes of Pegasus and stuff would be communicating to its command and control server through the use of high port numbers. We can identify and isolate that. And then we have the device security events, so a list of all recent security events on the device. So what this gives the security team is visibility. It gives power back and it gives them an understanding on their posture across tens, hundreds of thousands of devices, configured completely around the policies that they've implemented. And this is essentially the policy. So we segregate this down to baseline, being able to block malware, spyware, phishing, command and control communications, spam, typical stuff you'd expect in an MTD. We then look at the advanced Corrata MTD possibilities when we look at defining policies, and this is all through looking at TCP, UDP ports, vulnerable network traffic through HTTP post, and then it's being able to identify, common ports, being able to report on the use of high ports, and then being able to look at obviously, as I said, the TCP and UDP. With that, then, it's the DLP. So being able to come in here and define policy on how you want your business using DLP. So you have file sharing, webmail, and AI services. As of today, we will be adding to that to include IT products as well. And it's being able to go in here and go to AI services and say, I want to block, report, allow, or block silently on all of the traffic coming to these services. So it gives you flexibility, which is key when you're defining policy for personal phones to policy for corporate phones. And then you can come here and make exceptions. So you can come down and you can find your specific AI products and allow traffic to the specific solutions, Copilot, Gemini, whoever it might be that your business has said they're allowed to use. With this comes a huge amount of granularity. You can, allow traffic and block traffic depending on network connection type, if it's Wi-Fi, if it's cellular. And then you can obviously pop in as many customer overrides, custom blocks as your business needs based on the phone's usability. The final thing then to touch on this is the reporting capabilities. A system, in my view, like this is great to have, but the reports on the back end are even better for business leaders or department heads that want to access the information. When we come down here and we access this data, I'll just go to here, when predefined reports, and we can essentially be able to bring them up. And sorry, it always happens on a live demo here, detail security support, bring them up and get a really well built report at the end of every month, week, month, quarter, email to whomever in the business that you'd like to give you a good assessment of the security stance of all the devices, network threats blocked, top security threats, security blocked trends, device issues, top vulnerable devices, and really have a report there that's showing the power of having an MTD, a specific mobile solution there, providing protection to those fleet of devices globally or throughout Ireland. That's the whistle-stop tour of Corrata. I hope it landed well and made sense in the back of the content that we covered off on the webinar data. So I will hand back to Dara now to continue on the agenda of today's webinar. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to make sure everyone knows the Q&A is open there. So if any questions relevant to your organization, you can drop them into the Q&A box there. I suppose, Matt, just looking at that, I can see why having a report like that it would be a must for most people looking after those devices every month, and just being able to copy and paste that into a higher report would be really, really important. I suppose when I was doing another thing that I wanted to touch on, when I was doing the research for this webinar a couple of weeks ago, I came across the Dark Sword attack, which was, as far as I could see, was a 0-click, 0-day. Would you like to give the audience just a brief overview on how Corrata would help deal with that situation?
Yes, so it's an interesting one. We just hosted a webinar on Dark Sword and the Corona. The interesting thing there is these nation grade spyware applications that were delivered out, as you mentioned there. Zero touch, 0-click installation. So it's something that is really traditionally hard for any solution, MDM, MTD, to identify. As I mentioned in my presentations, all spyware, malwares, they need to communicate, typically with command and control servers, and they typically do that over unused and high port numbers to, go between the weeds and not get identified. Due to our architecture, as I mentioned, where we sit on the device in our DPI, we're able to understand if there is any communication going from an application on the phone to a command and control server, and then we can identify that as a must investigate. And then with that as well, with the likes of port numbers, we can identify any communications over those higher, less frequently used port numbers, which is normally an indication of we need to take a quicker look at a better look here. And then to layer on top of that with our device scanning capabilities, we can identify any applications that are on the phone that are potentially asking for risky accessibility settings on the device as well, and we can identify them. So there's 3 ways in which we actively look to monitor, mitigate, and defend against spyware.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's really important, especially going forward as well, as we see more of these type of non-phishing threats come true. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll just pop over to the Q&A section there. So we've a couple of questions that came in prior to the event, so we'll put them up here. Our employees use personal devices, but we've no authority to install security software on them. What can we realistically do? I've seen that, and I've seen that in a non-for-profit type situation, where you have contract staff coming in and out, or maybe even in a hospital where theatre nurses don't have a corporate device, but they have a contact number that and then they have their email on it as well, stuff like that. So what have you seen in that, Matt?
Yeah, it's kind of a double-layered discussion that we have, tends to be with security teams and C-suite, and the response that we typically have. So firstly, it all falls into that zero trust bracket. A business needs to take control into those devices that are authenticating through, and it's about having those policies in place to say that if you want to authenticate through into our emailing service, into our whatever it might be, you need to have a security software implemented on the device and an assessment done which determines that device is secure enough. And when they kind of kick back on that, we tend to lead into the regulatory kind of answer. Whereas if there is a breach, if there's a compliance issue, if GDPR is involved, if NIS2 is involved, the kickback that you're having from your contractors isn't going to be sufficient, reason that you haven't had these protocols in place. So it really all comes back to that zero trust piece. Yeah,
it's simple. If you want to get on the network, you have to authenticate, and you have to have a little bit of software on the phones, and then I suppose it comes down to HR and everything else getting involved in terms of incentivizing people to keep their devices up to date. I know from looking at it as well. I couldn't believe it actually when I was doing the research that Android devices go end of life after a couple of years. I think it's about 3 or 4 years, whereas iPhones tend to be 5 to 7 years before they go end of life. And I even saw Apple, because of the dark sword thing, gave a security update there to those end of life phones as well. So again, it's worth thinking about what OS you want to have on your corporate devices as well.
It's vital to identify it, because if these older devices are in the business operating on really outdated operating systems, there's huge vulnerabilities there, and they're unsupported at this stage, so they're not receiving.
Well, they're unpatched. They're unpatched over
exactly.
a year
So,
or maybe 24 months. Without a patch. Okay. Next one. How do we make the case internally for mobile security investment when leadership sees phones as low priority compared to maybe endpoint or perimeter or network security?
Yeah, and again, it just comes back to that discussion, the point that I had in the presentation there of that business impact. Typically, security products, the conversations we have are what ifs. When we move that conversation more to these are the fundamental business impacts being felt across Europe when breaches do happen, the average breach being up over 3 million, reputational damage, trust issues, it becomes more of a must-have rather than a like to have when it's framed in the right context. So the discussions that we're aiding our kind of champions with are around those business impact discussions, because they're real life, quantifiable issues for boards to I suppose challenge.
That's great, Matt. Thanks very much for that. Well, if there's no other Q&As, thanks to Peter there. He's put up a link there for a handy website for checking end of life on those devices. So that's handy. Yep. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next steps, Matt. So if people on this call are interested in finding out more information about Corrata and what the next steps are, what do you offer in terms of getting hands-on with the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a twofold offer. It's firstly about working with the businesses present here today, should they wish to run that assessment with them to determine their risk profile, to understand where the gaps are, where their concerns should lie, where their concerns are, and being able to map that back to, I suppose, what the industry's feeling. And that's an exercise that we're doing with companies that get a huge amount of value from it. And then in the back of that, then engaging in a 4-week proof of concept. So getting Corrata into the business, letting them understand how non-invasive it is as a product to the end user due to our privacy focus, and allowing them then to use it throughout the normal day to understand what's possible when we focus on mobile protection. So twofold, a full security assessment end to end, leading into a 4-week free to use period of the solution. I'd be delighted to work with everybody on that.
That's great. So people can get in touch with us, either just reply to any of the emails you received about the webinar, or our details are here on screen. 1 second, just reshare that window. Yeah, it's there. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so we're more or less finished now anyway. So look, we'll wrap up on this if there's no other questions. So look, hopefully we've painted a clearer picture of BYOD and mobile threats in general, what's out there at the minute, how you can get a clearer visibility on what devices are on the corporate network, what have access to what. So this is what we're set up to do. So if you want any more information, please get in touch with us over the next coming days. Okay, so Matt, thanks very much, and I want to thank everybody for their attendance here today and their participation. So with that, I'll see you all on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.